In the early hours of the morning, a family of 4 and their pet dog unexpectedly got into their car and drove away from their small town home, never to be seen alive again. This is the true, solved disappearance of the Yamagami family. According to neighbors, relatives, and other acquaintances, the Yamagami family were very kind, respected, and prestigious. The father, 58-year-old Masahiro, worked at a construction company. His family have been in the area for generations and were well known and liked within the community. Masahiro was heir to the family and their land, but when he eloped with a woman his family didn't approve of, he was cast aside. Years later, however, he reconciled with them once again when he had a child with his wife. The mother, 51-year-old Junko, was the aforementioned wife of Masahiro. In the same field to her husband, she worked at a quarrying company, but had previously worked as a nurse when she got married. She was well liked by her colleagues and had many friends. The daughter, 26-year-old Chie, was the only child of Masahiro and Junko. She worked as an elementary school teacher in charge of first-year students. She was described as being very friendly and warm-hearted, and was popular with students and teachers alike because of her beauty. She lived alone in an apartment building approximately 30 kilometers away from her parents, but often stayed at the family home on weekends. She was very close with her family and was engaged to her partner. The grandmother, 79-year-old Mie, was Masahiro's retired mother. Because she was elderly and suffered from a bad back which limited her mobility, she lived in the Yamagami home together with her son and his wife. While she was very friendly with neighbors, it is said that her relationship with Junko was a little cold due to the previous elopement, but things seem to have improved a lot as the years went by. The family pet, a Shih Tzu dog named Leo, was well loved by the family. It was white, grey, and black in colour, and around its neck was a red collar with Leo Yamagami written on it in Japanese. All in all, a pretty average Japanese family. On the 3rd of June 2001, this family was living in Sera, a small mountainous town in Hiroshima Prefecture, Japan. While the day was relatively normal for them, it was a little livelier than usual. The mother, Junko, was set to travel to China with her work colleagues for a fun excursion the following day, so she prepared luggage and breakfast in advance of her departure in the morning. Despite being a Sunday, the daughter Chie had work that day until late in the evening because it was Parents' Day at the elementary school, followed by a ball game. After finishing for the day, Chie gave a lift home to a fellow teacher and was going to return to her own apartment until she remembered that she had left some makeup at her parents' home, so she decided to go there instead. According to the fellow teacher, Chie called her mother to explain that she was coming to stay at the family home that night. For the father and grandmother, there was nothing unusual planned. Masahiro had work the next day as usual, but nothing unanticipated happened for these family members on that day. Chie dropped off the fellow teacher at around 9:30 p.m. that evening before driving to her parents' house, where she parked her car. This was the last confirmed sighting of her. On the 4th of June 2001, the next day, one of Junko's worried co-workers came to the family home. Junko hadn't shown up at the meeting place or called the other travelers, so a member decided to go to her home just after midday to find out what was wrong. The house was locked and seemingly vacant, which was unusual since the grandmother couldn't walk far and should have been home. The family car, a white Toyota Sprinter, was also gone, but Chie's car was still there. Fearing that something was off, Junko's work colleagues contacted the authorities and relatives. When authorities arrived, they discovered that the kitchen and hallway lights were left on, but confirmed that no one was in the home. The breakfast that had been prepared the previous day was left on the table untouched, with an insect net over the top to prevent bugs from eating it. Junko's packed travel bag, ready for her China trip, was left in the home complete with passport and travel money, and all the futons for all family members were laid on the floor neatly, as if no one had slept in them. Besides the futons were the family members' clean clothes, folded and ready to wear for the next day. While police had a look around, relatives of the family called Masahiro's workplace and discovered that he hadn't shown up for work that day. The school where Chie worked was also called, but the staff there said that Chie hadn't shown up for work and that they had been unable to contact her. Considering how hardworking and dedicated these people were to their jobs, it was thought to be extremely out of character for them to simply skip work without calling ahead. Fearing that something unusual must have happened, police decided to give a more thorough search of the house and surrounding areas, as well as interview neighbors. A helicopter was dispatched to fly around the surrounding area, and close to 50 officers searched nearby forests, ponds, and mountains to see if they could find any trace of the family or hints to where they could have gone. Authorities conducted interviews of the locals. They discovered that a neighbor had heard the sound of a car door shutting near the Yamagami home at around 10:50 p.m. the night before. This person didn't see anything, however, and it is possible that the sound came from the daughter Chie arriving at the home rather than the family leaving. A newspaper delivery man also confirmed that the family car was missing from its usual parking spot when he delivered a newspaper to the house at 4 a.m., meaning that they must have left before this time. Together with the last confirmed sighting of Chie at around 9:30 p.m. by the fellow teacher we discussed previously, that means the family must have disappeared between 9:30 p.m. and 4 a.m. And as authorities searched the home, things got very bizarre. Everything seemed very normal. There was almost nothing out of place at all, which left investigators baffled. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of forced entry, no sign of robbery, no sign of a hasty escape, no sign of an accident, no sign of an emergency, no clues. Absolutely nothing. What was unusual, however, was that the front door was locked. According to locals in the area, it was extremely rare for people to lock their doors in such a small mountainous town where crime is almost non-existent. The back door to the home remained unlocked, but securing the main door was something that was considered quite uncharacteristic of the town. Strangely, items that one would normally take with them if they were leaving their homes, mobile phones, wallets, purses, and pages, were all left behind in the home and laid out as if ready for the next day, just like the clothes. The searches around the local area turned up empty, and interviews with neighbors and relatives also didn't bear fruit. Everyone was just as surprised as the police that an entire family could simply walk out of the house and leave everything exactly as it was, right down to breakfast being set on the table. The only things that seemed to be missing from the home, other than the car of course, were 3 pairs of pajamas and 4 pairs of outdoor sandals. Again, this seemed very odd to investigators. In Japan, leaving the home in pajamas is socially considered quite a shameful act, almost to the level of leaving the home in underwear. So this told investigators that the family must have left urgently and extremely quickly without time to prepare. But really, the authorities had nothing to go on. No leads came in from the public, and searchers failed to turn up any clues at all. Relatives and friends, including Chie's fiancé, put up missing posters and handed out flyers all over Hiroshima, but unfortunately nothing came from it. And nothing about the case would come up until over a year later. On the 7th of September 2002, investigators got a phone call from a member of the public. Someone had seen an upturned car in the waters around Kyomaru Dam, approximately 7 kilometers from the Yamagami home. The vehicle was visible because low rainfall that year had reduced the amount of water. Authorities, having no prior reports of a crash or abandoned car, raced down to the scene and pulled it from the water. The windscreen was broken, but inside the car, police found the skeletonized remains of 4 people and a dog. And if that wasn't convincing enough, the license plate was consistent with the missing Yamagami's car. DNA tests and dental records were later taken to conclusively prove that the remains did indeed belong to the missing family. They had finally been found. But this was just the beginning of the mystery, because while they had been discovered at last, we still do not know the most important thing. Why did this happen? First of all, let's eliminate a few theories that have been brought forward. Number 1, a burglary that went wrong. As I previously mentioned, there was no sign of forced entry, fingerprints, or signs of a struggle in the home, so most think that this is very unlikely. Furthermore, bank books, jewelry, and wallets full of money were left completely untouched, and there were no signs that the home had been searched by a third party. Even Junko's travel money, totaling 150,000 yen, was left where it was, completely visible. Number 2, a kidnapping attempt. Another theory that most find very unlikely. Again, there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry, and such actions are usually followed up with demands, such as money for the prisoner's release. However, no such thing occurred. Also, the pet was taken with the family. Would kidnappers or burglars go to the trouble of taking the dog too? And remember that the front door was locked. If the family were forced to leave their home, why would the perpetrators take the time to lock the door behind them? And why would neighbors not hear anything? You would imagine that there would be screams or loud noises if 4 people had been taken by force. Number 3, the family went willingly to their doom. This theory is not consistent with almost everything we know. First of all, investigators doubt that all 4 members would be eager to throw away their lives because there was nothing to indicate that they were in any trouble. And if by some chance they would all agree to do this, why did Junko bother to get ready for the trip? Why were bedding, breakfast, and clothes prepared? Why didn't they leave some sort of message for their loved ones? Why did most members leave in pajamas and sandals? The young daughter Chie also had a promising career ahead of herself, and she was engaged. Although we have no idea what happens behind closed doors, it is said that she was very happy and excited to be married. The family also didn't have any money troubles or any other kind of trouble for that matter. According to a bank book found by investigators at the scene, the family had an account with roughly 20 million yen in it, not to mention cash inside the home and in other accounts. All members had secure, well-paying jobs. Therefore, while we can't be 100% certain, it does seem very unlikely that the family would all mutually decide to drive to their watery graves. So, what could have happened? Well, let's begin by having a look at a few things that point towards one person in the family: Masahiro. When the car was removed from the water, it was discovered that Masahiro, the father, was the one in the driver's seat, and the key was in the ignition. Not only that, but he was the only one wearing outdoor clothes rather than pajamas, suggesting that there had been some preparation on his part. And to further point towards Masahiro, The car was driven from a road that was not used by the public or known to locals. It was a road used by construction workers in the area. In other words, Masahiro, a construction worker himself, was the only one in the family who would have known about this road's existence. The police certainly seemed to believe that Masahiro was responsible too, and made a declaration stating so before closing the investigation soon after the discovery of the car. But this doesn't really solve anything, because we still do not have a motive for his supposed actions. Well, when police were investigating when the family initially went missing, Junko's father gave another hint that allowed us to understand Masahiro's situation a little better. According to Junko's father, Junko had called him on the telephone and said that Masahiro had been acting a little strangely in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. It appeared that he'd been brooding over something and was less talkative than usual. And what could he have been brooding over? Well, it could be the most prevalent rumor surrounding this case. The following, as I said, is just a rumor and there is no evidence for it, but according to some people in the area, Junko was having an affair with her boss. Not only that, but her boss was going to attend the China trip together with Junko the day after her disappearance. Could Masahiro have discovered the affair and, in a fit of jealousy and sadness, decided to end everything by tricking his family into the car and driving it into the water? According to friends and relatives, the relationship between Junko and Masahiro was very good. They were close and affectionate, and Masahiro had even cut ties with his family and prestigious lineage to marry her, as we discussed at the beginning of the video. Could the rumors of a cheating wife have compelled him to commit such a terrible act? If that were true, you may be thinking, well, what about the daughter, grandmother, and pet dog? Well, Masahiro's elderly mother could barely walk, and certainly couldn't take care of herself. Not only that, but had she been left behind, she would have been shunned by the community and had to suffer from gossiping neighbors, as often happens in rural Japan. Maybe Masahiro, in his desperate and rash state of mind, considered it a mercy to take her along too. As for the daughter, this is a little complicated. As we know, she showed up to the home by chance that evening since she had forgotten her makeup. I wonder if Masahiro didn't intend to take her along, but because she showed up unexpectedly, she got caught up in it. Or maybe it's the opposite, and because she showed up, he saw his chance to get the whole family. His relationship with her was great, just like the rest of the family, but I guess when things seem desperate enough, people can convince themselves to do unspeakable acts. As for the dog, it is possible that Masahiro felt in a similar way to his mother, and that it would be a mercy to take it along because it couldn't care for itself. But even if all of this were true, which we have no evidence for, how did Masahiro convince his family to leave their home in their pajamas without phones or money? And if he did convince them, why didn't they question where they were going or what they were doing? I doubt the family would simply sit back and relax as they went down a dark construction road along a dam without proper clothing. Some have suggested that Masahiro may have given the family something to make them sleep and then carried them to the car. While nothing can be proven on this front since the remains were skeletonized when found, I have a hard time believing this. This is because investigators specifically searched for such substances in the home and found nothing. Also, they were all wearing outdoor sandals. Japanese people don't wear shoes inside, so if Masahiro did indeed give them something to make them sleep, why would he go to all the trouble of putting sandals on their feet? It just doesn't make sense to me. And unfortunately, since everyone that can provide answers is not alive anymore, we will never know the exact circumstances behind this tragic incident. If investigators are correct in their assumption that Masahiro deceived the family and drove into the water, I wonder what he said to make his family get into the car that night. It must have been something that sounded very urgent to make them leave as they did. Whatever the reason, I feel a lot of pity for the family, especially Chie, who was still so young and had a whole life ahead of her. I only hope that, now they have been found, they can rest in peace. Thank you for watching my 20th YouTube video. If you liked it, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you wish to see more. Cases like this are always a little frustrating. On the one hand, we know what happened and the family was discovered, but on the other, there are so many unanswered questions and things that do not make sense. Considering the lack of evidence, I find it a little uncomfortable to accuse Masahiro of being the culprit who drove his unwitting family to an early grave. But given the information that we know, I, along with the police, believe that this is the most likely cause. I think, for whatever reason, he alone planned to take the lives of his family. In any case, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, goodbye.